Imagine this, a mysterious warrior emerges out of nowhere on an empty city street. They become prone to various acts of violence whilst also seeing others commit violent acts. As a result, they wish to uphold justice by violating those who have violated, also personally financially profiting off those very same acts. Prime examples of such concepts in cinema exist both in the West as well as overseas, with the now iconic genre of spaghetti westerns originally popularized by Clint Eastwood's Dollar Trilogy, being an actual blatant copy of legendary Japanese films. In particular, Akira Kurosawa's original samurai film, Yojimbo, being the basis from which Eastwood's trilogy even began, due to a similar premise being seen in the trilogy's own debut film, A Fistful of Dollars. However, the latter is less of an act of plagiarism than it is an act of localized adaptation of the universal archetype known as the Outlaw, as both Yojimbo's samurai-wielding Ronin and Eastwood's man-with-no-name cowboy depict living in variously different environments, yet an inherently similar lifestyle, this being to uphold justice and make some money on the side, hence the compound word of using out and law, depicting the external and usually extreme actions committed outside of the justice system. Yojimbo's unique take on the samurai outlaw comes from both its calm, collected, and often difficult to read protagonist, as well as the unconventional introduction of a weapon that berates the way of the samurai, this being the firearm, as it's a complete disgrace to the samurai honor code known as Bushido, in permitting an equal playing field during a one-on-one battle. The gun is a sign of playing dirty in the world of cinema, as it's often used to kill off characters in a near instant due to its quick and effective long-distance use. The existence of this weapon would ultimately, as all things do, soon become romanticized in the West via Hollywood, becoming a staple in the very basics of how to write a spaghetti western and giving rise to one of cinema's most now iconic action set pieces, the quick draw. In a quick draw, often two individuals stand on opposite sides, both ideologically as well as physically. The two put their right hand over their right hip, above the entrance of their holster where their weapon is held, and whoever draws and fires their weapon first is considered to be the victor. A Fistful of Dollars takes the scenario a step further, by having its climax have its protagonist face against not one, but 5 other opponents, obviously representing the numbers being stacked against the man with no name. However, just as Yojimbo's climax had the Ronin dispose of its unique obstacle via using unconventional fighting methods, Eastwood's character also learns to play dirty, as instead of simply facing against all 5 and drawing his gun, and likely having won said fight if he did that due to his unmatched marksmanship being shown prior, the man with no name plays dirty, and instead wishes to break the opponent's will, by showing that one way or another, even a rifle can't stop you from getting what you deserve, this being karma. This is represented through Eastwood's character revealing that he used a steel chestplate to protect himself from the antagonist's bullets, which is a stark contrast as well as a tribute to Yojimbo's use of the throwing knife, in the sense that it is also an object that overthrows that film's main obstacle, because although both steel plate and throwing knife represent thinking outside the box, they each uncover different topics based on the cultures each is surrounded in, the chestplate representing the West's hopeless dedication to the firearm, and the throwing knife representing East Asia's hopeless dedication to an ancient code of honor. Such a message in the film's climax makes me wonder what other pieces of media take the archetype of the rogue warrior to make something more of them, in particular the field of anime, as it too is often seen as being a unique form of visual storytelling in terms of deconstructing certain archetypes and topics, and because my channel is mainly surrounded around anime. Through my viewing and rewatching of certain shows, I found not one but quite a few shows which innovate and don't just do what Eastwood or Kurosawa already did before, because although they were the first to popularize and truly introduce the vigilante outcast, various other works have broken down, humanized, and criticized such a way of life, at times even saying that such a profession in reality is pretty impossible, and will likely get you killed, and perhaps even how such a way of life can completely morally destroy one's own ideals and remove the very thing that made them who they once were. Henceforth in this video, I'll be discussing a few anime that both take inspiration from traditional vigilantes, known as outlaws, whilst also flipping them completely on their heads. And so, let's begin with our first show. I recently finished Trigun after having it on my list of shows to watch for years, and there's one thing that I don't think I'll ever forget when it comes to that show, and that's its characters. From Nicholas D. Wolfwood, Knives Millions, and Vash the Stampede, Trigun's strength lies with what its characters stand for and what they do with those ideals. Trigun's manga author Yasuhiro Naitao was heavily inspired by westerns, and it's obvious from the moment you watch the show. From the very first scene of a saloon in the middle of the desert, to a mysterious outlaw with a bounty on his head, to the acoustic guitar played in the background during the standoff between the bounty hunters and the outlaw. Trigun is clearly loving every bit of being a space western, and such creative liberties are proof of that. One additional thing Naitao made sure to do with Trigun is to have the protagonist, Vash, be the exact polar opposite of what we often expect from an outlaw. Vash doesn't kill. He tries not to ever do so at all costs. In fact, he would rather take a bullet before letting his opponent take that very same bullet. Such a dangerous lifestyle is reflected through the scars Vash collects on his body, each symbolizing the permanent scars he has gained through his dedication to his duty, as well as maintaining the fact that he too is mortal. Ultimately, the very theme of Trigun is mortality, with various characters questioning and judging what the value of life is, and who exactly can be the one to judge who lives and who doesn't. Vash's own lifestyle is questioned due to its near impossible chances of lasting forever. This is done through the stark contrast of Vash's twin brother named Knives, having a much more extremist approach to the value of life, representing this contrast through the analogy of the spider trapping the butterfly in its web. As whilst Vash wishes to free the butterfly, Knives decides to take a much simpler approach and just kill the spider, saying that the spider would have otherwise killed the butterfly. It's a beautifully simple analogy that sets in stone their clashing morals through the course of the entire show, with Knives slowly seeing all of humanity as the very spider he once killed, and Vash still wishing to save everyone no matter the cost, believing everyone should have a second chance, no matter their past actions. The further the story goes, the more Vash's ideals are put into question, with Knives constantly trying to force his hand into breaking his honor code, even making it more conflicting for us personally, as Knives' first hand shows the horrors humans bring upon both themselves and the planet through their own desperation, and that this desperation means that humans will stop at nothing to remain alive, even if it means the destruction of the very planet they live on. Knives' need to destroy his brother's ideals is very similar to how the throwing knife and the steel plate represent the destruction of a former way of life, with Vash's own love and peace motto giving off a similar way of justification to that of the Bushido code virtues such as benevolence and having character. However, it's also important to know that this brotherly conflict isn't told to us right away. Through a sequence of slowly built up events that are of equal consequence, Trigun takes its time for us to even truly believe that this is the very Vash people have been so scared of. It's the natural need to believe the fears of the common folk in who they perceive Vash to be that the false rhetoric, in human truth, is strengthened. This human misconception is best represented through my very own personal favorite character of the show, Nicholas D. Wolfwood. Obviously both because of his badass appearance as well as what he actually stands for. Wolfwood was introduced to us as a humble and compassionate priest that cared for the youth, to then slowly be revealed to us as a man who would sacrifice one life to save the many. He is no doubt one of the most notable rivalries / allies of Vash, because of his tragic conclusion being a cautionary tale of restitude. Wolfwood represents the viewer due to the fragility of our physical being, and the difficulty we often have in changing our ways, having his very own death be a result of the effect Vash's moral code had on his very own ideology. Simply put, he tried to be like Vash and spared his opponent, and what did that get him? Killed. It creates a conflict of our very own interest in believing whether what Vash even stands for can truly be manifested into something worthwhile for humans. Trigun as a whole is a lesson on what we can stand for, what we try to stand for, and what we will likely never be. Oh, sorry. The theme is just it's so catchy, man. I can't help it sometimes. Arguably one of the most influential anime in bringing popularity to anime to the West, Cowboy Bebop is not just based on spaghetti westerns, but also science fiction, horror, drama, action, noir, comedy, and adventure. I mean, the title has cowboy in it. Pretty sure it's a reference to like boys and cows or something, I don't know. It is, as it says in its very own intermission card, the work which becomes a new genre itself. will be called Cowboy Bebop. Bebop is one of the most unique experiences any viewer can have when watching any piece of media, due to its use in anthological stories blended with specific character-oriented arcs. Such a form of narrating the world of Bebop permits each of the members of the Bebop crew to feel alive and like they live outside of the screen. The main character of the show is also the embodiment of the man with no name, except, well, he has a name, and it's Spike Spiegel. Spike is a special case of the protagonist. He's got that gruff charisma of Clint Eastwood's character, as well as a very wonky yet frequently righteous sense of justice. However, what makes him truly similar to Eastwood's Cowboy is both of their connections to their past and the influence it has on their present actions. As within A Fistful of Dollars, Eastwood's character, nicknamed John, saves a family by helping them escape due to them reminding him of somebody he once knew. Such a need to have John's present actions be the result of his past experiences is very relevant and familiar to Spike, because the further we go into his story, whenever Spike hears the name of the criminal syndicate leader Vicious, he changes his persona entirely, only appearing to be driven by rage and hate. And when Spike finally loses somebody near and dear to him, to Vicious, that rage and hate transform into revenge. This leads to him finally leaving the Bebop crew after their already ever-growing disconnection. With him preparing to leave, members of the crew, such as Jet and Faye, are aware of his stubbornness and cautiously accept his need to finish what has already begun. Yet they also wish for him to give up his cause because they know he'll likely never come back. Matter of fact, Spike's suicidal tendency to conclude his efforts is echoed through the entire show, sometimes in a more extreme sense, such as fighting a mentally deranged serial killer at an amusement park with severe injuries, or in a more comedic sense, such as the absurd race in completing a bounty he has with a character that can only be considered as the most cowboy I've ever seen. Can we consider this to be racist? Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that Spike is always somebody who finishes what he starts, even if it could possibly get him killed. It speaks on the vigilantism of the Western outlaw, whilst also referring to the ability to seek closure, even if one might not even know what exactly that closure may be.
Oh well, whatever happens, happens.
Black Lagoon is a different breed of action. It's the one that's furthest from the previous two mentioned in terms of using spaghetti western techniques, but it is also the most western in terms of being an action-oriented spectacle with an overabundance of violence, with lots of
fucking bitch!
Fuck you.
You look like shit.
and blood and money, alcohol, and many, many guns. Sure, from a surface level, it may feel very offbeat for an anime, and such absurdity is a clear nod to Western filmmakers, most notably Quentin Tarantino. But when one looks beyond all these swearing and gunfights, it's the story of nihilist tendencies, with its main characters coming from a group for hire called Lagoon Company, consisting of various kinds of members. However, the two primary members of the group that are of interest for this video are going to be the characters of Rock and Revy, both of which who consist outside of the law due to them being mercenaries located in the fictional city of Roanapur on the border of East Thailand and Cambodia. Yet the way in which both of them approach their lives as mercs is the polar opposite. Revy is one who above all else focuses on survivability and believing that fundamentally everything has no meaning except the money that keeps her alive. Rock, on the other hand, is one who wishes to never pick up a gun in order to never become someone like Revy, instead hoping to perhaps one day return to normalcy. But what exactly is normalcy? That's what Black Lagoon cross-examines, as its commentary on social status is fully encapsulated in nihilism, believing that nothing is true and everything will and can change for both the better and the worse. Therefore, as the story progresses, Rock himself begins to delve into dangerous games of gambling the outcomes of others' lives, enveloping himself in a world of criminal fascination, because although he may not be the one who pulls the literal trigger like Revy does, it's his involvement and reaction to somebody holding that trigger that makes him more closely related to Revy than the Rock we first met. Such a change in character causes Revy to begin to question her own purpose and Rock's very own ever-growing involvement with Lagoon Company, with her wondering that perhaps if somebody like Rock can change in such an extreme way, then maybe she can too. Unlike Trigun or Bebop, Black Lagoon focuses on the people like Revy and Rock that are considered to be at the bottom of the social and economic ladder, thus making it more bound in reality than its aforementioned alternatives, questioning and making us wonder why mercenaries and particular crimes even exist. making us think if there is more to crime than just the need to exploit others for their own benefit, and what made those surrounded by a life of crime also become engulfed in it. Black Lagoon makes us realize that, unlike Hollywood westerns, the world isn't black and white. It isn't good versus bad. There's a story outside of a certain number of minutes that we watch. What originally appeared to be a mindless killer to Rock now becomes the subject of mischaracterization and resentment of a world that didn't respect or even acknowledge her. As Revy once said, when you take away the sentimentality of a thing, it becomes just that, a thing. So who's to say the same can't be said for a person? Mortality, overdedication, and nihilism are only a few of the complex themes that I delved into in this video. There are likely so many more pieces of media that make something more out of what originally was a standard formula of character writing. I would have liked to bring up Samurai Champloo in order to somewhat compare it more to Yojimbo, but I didn't want to overburden myself or the video, nor did I have really that much time to go back and also rewatch it. If any of you had found the topics I brought up in this video to be interesting, then please expand, explore, and even explain them down below in the comments. I would really love to hear what you all have to say on specific things surrounding a character in an anime or live-action film surrounding the Outlaw archetype. I wanted to touch upon this video topic because I grew up with a lot of cowboy and samurai films, and really loved the atmosphere, meaning, and traits the Ronin and the cowboy gave off. And it made me want to see if there were more realistic and deeply flawed versions of these characters in other pieces of literature. I'd also like to say that my previous video, the Evangelion one, did incredibly well, and I can't thank you enough. It means so much to me that you decided to actually write your opinions and even some full-on theories surrounding the final film, and Asuka as a whole. This gave me the pleasure to discuss with each of you, and I couldn't have asked for a better outcome for what was originally such a painstakingly long-ass video to make. Also, most likely at the time of me writing this, the channel is nearing or may have already reached 100 subscribers, which is insane. I'll be making a personalized video / review of an anime that's very near and dear to me for such a milestone, so stay tuned for that. But other than that, I think that's all for this video. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and goodbye.